All right, hello everyone. Eric Marks here again with FindingMiddle-earth.com, and welcome to part 2 of the RAW processor battle and software comparison video. In the part 2 version here, we're going to basically post-process one of the photos that we looked at in the last video in all 5 of those different RAW processors. We're just going to do it to my taste, where I like the contrast and the color and the sharpening and all that stuff, and then we're going to export those as full resolution JPEGs, and then we're going to compare those. And let's just see, again, just kind of an interesting test. If one turns out like a better color or a better sharpening or maybe less sharp, it'll just be kind of interesting. And this isn't like a video to just tell you which RAW processor to get. It's just more of an interesting test. And so since I was going to be doing the test anyway, I thought it might make a cool video. It certainly is interesting to see how each processor kind of renders the files a little differently. So before we get in, what will be really interesting is that if you ever post-process like one photo multiple times before, you'll know that you can never post-process one photo the exact same way every single time unless you save your settings as a preset. So it's always kind of cool to see how just in 5 or 10 minutes your mood might change. Maybe you like to put a different little spin on the photo, maybe a little more color, a little less color, a little, an Orton effect, or maybe a fairy tale effect. It's just, there's all these different possibilities, and sometimes I've post-processed one photo multiple times until I'm like happy with one result. So it'll be interesting to see how I do it back to back to back with 5 different softwares. So, all right, let's get started. Number 1 is going to be Lightroom. All right, so here we are inside of Lightroom, and I picked this photo because I thought this one would be the most fun to process, honestly, and this one also has a good mix of colors. It has these kind of faded greens and the rusticy red barn, kind of an aqua color and a green color in the water. So I don't know, I think it's got a nice color palette to start with, so we can just, I don't know, learn something from the way I process this and how this kind of renders through color in all 5 different the processors here. So all right, let's go ahead and get started. So with this, let's see. I know this one needs to be kind of heavy with contrast. I know I want that because all the trees and surrounding areas here are just kind of, it's just a bunch of distraction and kind of just fluff, if you will, that's just taking away from the barn. So I like the reflections in the water. I just don't know if I like this many of them. So I think a nice maybe 4x5 crop would do this photo good. Let's do a 4x5 and see what that might do. Let's see, maybe something like that. Just put the barn dead center, which I hardly ever do, but let's see how that looks. Yeah, I think that might actually just look the best. It gets away, it takes away a lot of the distraction. I like the 4x5 format with this photo. It looks good in my opinion. It's just enough surrounding trees to get that reflection, but it's not too much distraction. So let's try this. And then let's add a bunch of contrast. I know I want to do that. Ooh, I like that already. All right, this photo is not going to have to be pushed a long way. I can go ahead and tell you that already. Let's bump the exposure a little bit to compensate for that contrast. We'll bump the shadows ever so slightly, but I want to leave those alone for the most part. Let me set our contrast points here. Let me hold the Alt-Option key and get some whites going on in here. Do the same thing for the blacks. Something like that. Okay, that'll give us some more contrast. I already don't like what the contrast changes are doing to the barn, so keep that in mind. I'm not a big fan of what that did to the red color in the barn. I feel like it's a little muddy around this area here. So I don't like the color of it, and I don't like the red tinted hue that's going on in the shadows up under the barn now. It's kind of funky. So we'll have to address that in a minute here. Let's see, the white balance is okay. Maybe I could go a little bit colder with it. Let's go a little colder. There we go. It was a very, I took this back in winter, like the end of winter on the brink of spring, so it was a very cold day, so some colder white balance might do us some good there. Maybe even add a little bit of the green white balance in there to help the trees. There we go, a little bit. All right, clarity and dehaze, not really going to touch those. Vibrance and saturation, yuck. Let's hop into the HSL scale here. So I know I want to boost the greens a little bit. So let's see the green slider, maybe 25%, somewhere around there. And then the yellows will do the same. Okay, that boosted the greens a good bit there, but not too much. And then the reds, I want to take away from the reds. So I know there's some red and let's see, purple and magenta. Okay. Let's see what else. Maybe orange. Okay, so red, purple, magenta, and orange make up the barn. So the reason why that's important is because if you just move one slider and you don't move the others with it, then you're going to get color banding, where the colors start to actually separate from each other. So let's take these down in equal amounts. Let's go -30 or somewhere around there. Let's just type it in manually. -30 on the reds. We'll go, where are we at? We want -30 on the orange as well. And then -30 on the purple. And -30 on magentas. And that looks okay. That's back to our almost to our original faded barn, which I like. I like that. So let's just say we're okay with that for right now. Sharpening is my worst enemy in Lightroom. I'm convinced that Lightroom sharpening is just utterly useless. So the 40% in this whole deal here is the default that Lightroom has. Like if you double click these sliders, it just stays here. So you can take it all the way down if you want into your sharpening elsewhere. But again, this video is supposed to be processing them inside of just the processor with no help from Photoshop or plugins or anything. So let's take it up to like 60% and then let's play with the radius and see what we can do with this. Just see how that starts affecting things. It's not doing a whole lot for me. Okay, let's try the detail slider. Oh gosh, that just took a turn for the worse. Okay, let's not touch that. I feel like I'm gonna break the image now. That hurts my feelings a little bit. Okay, let's do the masking. Let's zoom this out. Hold Option and put a mask on the sharpening because I want as little of that as possible. Okay, that's good. I am going to, instead of the sharpening, I'm just gonna break down, grab an adjustment brush here and take a little bit of clarity and a little bit of exposure to the barn. The reason why I did exposure as well as clarity is because clarity sometimes darken things down, and exposure will be just like a little bit of dodging, so why not? We'll make our flow a little lower here and our feathering at 100% on the brush, and we'll just kind of go to town on the barn a little bit with that clarity and the exposure. And it might be lagging a little bit because all this time I thought my computer was just getting insanely slow, but I noticed that it was just Lightroom. Lightroom is, every time they do, I swear, every time Adobe says that there is a performance boost update, I feel like it's just going to get slower. Like I just know it's just going to get slower. And that's pretty much almost always what happens. So let's just keep painting that in. Trying careful not to nick the water. You definitely don't ever want to add clarity to water. Okay, we'll just say something like that works good. Let's fit that back, and let's see. Let me move the slider and see if I can dial it in on something we actually want here. Okay, maybe 30% works okay. Why not? Let's see the exposure. Taking it up, taking it down. I would guess we'll just leave that alone for the most part. We'll just bump it a tad. Yeah, okay, we'll leave it there. What happens if we bump the shadows a little bit? Anything good? Anything bad? Don't know. It's going slow, but it's not really doing much. I'm just gonna leave that alone. Okay, so we'll just call it at clarity and just a little bit of exposure and call it quits there. You definitely don't want to do clarity on the reflection or anything. You just want to call it quits on the barn itself. And I think this photo, at least right now, my mood tells me that it might benefit from a vignette, or at least for web use. When I print, I never do the vignettes because vignettes always come out just a little funky on print. And I'm still planning to do a print release on this. I'm going to do a limited edition print series on this photo. So I promise when I do the print, it won't have the vignette on it. But I think that it will look nice just on the digital image at least. Add some more of that. Take the midpoint in a little bit. Okay. That's good. Let's go back up. I think I might want to still add a little bit more contrast. I really want to just crank that contrast. Let's try the dehaze and see if that helps us out a little bit more. Yeah, that's not bad. Okay. So let's just say that let me see, make sure I'm good. Yeah, okay, we'll just say that that's good. I'm going to call it quits on the Lightroom version. I'm going to forget everything I just did here and start fresh inside of Capture One, but we'll go ahead and export this as a full res JPEG. And I just remembered something. Even though I think that this would look good as a 4:5 crop, I'm not going to crop any of these because I don't want to crop the original image. Let's go back to as shot. I don't want to crop it since we're doing kind of a zoom in test at 100%. That just wouldn't be fair if the Lightroom version was cropped and none of the other ones were cropped the same. So let's just leave it at full res, but just imagine that I would like a nice crop on it eventually, but I'm going to leave it this way for the test so that we can still do a full resolution D850 file zoom in test when we export this file. So keep that in mind. All right, so we'll go ahead and export this and we'll move on to the next software, which will be Capture One. All right, welcome to Capture One. So immediately you can see how the color is way more vibrant in this image, which we already knew that Capture One does that. We saw that a lot in our last test on our last video here. So honestly, I'm probably not going to have to touch the color as far as vibrance and saturation. I'm not going to have to touch that at all. I'm just going to mess with the white balance here. This is going to be a pretty quick editing job, I can already tell. So let's go ahead and do some contrast. You have to be careful with the contrast inside of Capture One because it very, very quickly starts to clip your highlights. So just watch out for that. Contrast tends to do that sometimes, but Capture One does it pretty quickly. So always accompany some contrast inside of Capture One with some highlight recovery there. So we'll do some highlights. We'll bump the shadows ever so slightly. Let's see. I like to add a little bit of structure inside of Capture One. It's not the same as clarity. It's a little bit like adding sharpening and then masking it just to the edges. It really brings out the texture in things. I don't add a lot, but I add just enough to make a difference. And if you do it correctly, you'll find that you probably don't even have to add sharpening. So we'll go ahead and do that globally because it almost never ruins the image. If we just go ahead and double click and we just have a quick look around, you can see how razor sharp that is. And there's no visible noise. Nope, no visible noise. I think we were good to go. Now, all the distraction stuff, by the way, in this video, like if you see this little ribbon up here and stuff, I'm not going to work on like, spot removal and distraction removal. We're just going to do just the processing because there's no reason for me to make you guys sit here and watch me remove little leaves and unwanted stuff in the photo. So we'll just strictly do the processing and act like all the distractions were already removed. So contrast is all we've done so far, I think. We'll take the exposure maybe down just a hair, okay? And I literally do mean just a hair. And then we'll go ahead and add our vignette like we did in Lightroom. So something like that. That's a nice vignette, actually. I like that. Let's definitely go to the white balance. Hop over to our color area here. Go to the Kelvin. Make that nice and cold. I like it that way. Normally I like things all like warm and cozy, but this one just needs kind of a colder, wintry feel. Let's add a little bit of the green tint in there. See how that looks? I like that. Well, folks, I don't think there is much else we need to do here. Let me see if there's anything else here. Let's see. Let's go ahead and turn the noise reduction off on this because it just doesn't need it, to be honest. Let's turn that off. Everything else is okay. Let's jump back over here, make sure we didn't miss anything. I might take the saturation down ever so slightly, just -3, just to calm it down a tad. I think everything else is good. Okay, so I'm happy with this one. This is going to be my final decision inside of Capture One. We'll go ahead and export the Capture One edit, and then we'll move on to Luminar. So we'll see you in just a second. All right, so here we are inside of Luminar. You'll have to excuse me. I am still a little new to the Luminar interface, so I might have to struggle to make my way around some of this stuff, but let's take a look here. So I obviously know what temperature I want. I want to take things a little cool. Let's add a little bit of the green tint like we did in the others. Definitely contrast. We know we want to go heavy on the contrast. Okay, so far I like what Luminar has done best with the contrast. It's got a very nice contrast slider. It moved everything, the word I guess I would say is equal. It moved everything kind of smooth and equal. The colors kind of match. It didn't like oversaturate one or the other. I still don't like how much it saturates the reds, but that's just this photo. You can't hide from that. So let's recover the highlights a little bit there. Pump the shadows. We'll bump those whites up a bit. Take the blacks down, get that good contrast. Well, you know what? Let's see what the clarity does inside of Luminar. I've never really played with it. Okay, it's definitely not as gross as Lightroom, that's for sure. So we might add just a little bit of that, maybe 9%. Let me take a quick zoom in here and see. Let me see. How do I zoom in? Let's go here. Let's zoom in real quick and make sure it's not adding any noise or banding or anything. It shouldn't with just 9%, but we will take a look here as soon as it renders the image. Let's see. Okay, it's actually not bad at all. So let's zoom that back out to 50%. Let me see if Command 0, there we go, Command 0 works inside of Luminar too. The old Command 0 trick to get it back to fit. Okay, let's see, denoise, I'm not going to do that, even though I will tell you, Skyloom's denoise algorithm is one of the best I've ever used for denoising stuff. So I will tell you that. I have played around with that a bit, and it is very, very impressive. So if you do have a lot of noise in this particular image, and you have a hard time getting rid of it, I would try denoise before I tried anything else. Let's take the saturation down globally, just like we did in the others. So with this one, the saturation has to do a little bit more work to desaturate things. Let's say maybe -11. Okay, looks okay. What is this? An accent AI filter. Let's boost that and see what happens. Whoa. Interesting. Okay, I might like a little bit of that. Let's leave like 3% of that. All right, I can deal with that. Let's take the dehaze and see what that does. I always like to play with the dehaze filters among the different softwares to see how they handle things. Ooh, this one adds a really good deep contrast. Not too shabby. All right, Luminar. Hey. Remove color cast. That's interesting. That sounds like a Nick collection kind of thing. Let's see what it does. Probably not using that right. Let's see, Auto 1. Remove color cast. All right, I'm not going to touch that. Advanced contrast. You know I got to have a play with that. What does that do? Let's see. Amount. Okay, I see. It's like a micro contrast. Interesting. Highlights, midtones, shadows. So it's like the trifecta there. Okay, interesting. I like how it's targeting certain things there, and then you can balance. Whoa. Sorry, guys. I'm kind of noobing out here. Nerding out and noobing out at the same time because I don't know what I'm doing. But I kind of like that extra bit of deepness in the shadows, so I'm going to leave whatever the heck I just did. Let me go back to the balance and make that a little darker. All right. Okay, so I think things are a little bit too... I don't know what the word. It's a little too digital. It's like a really big digital edge on this. So I know what I need to do. I'm going to take the, let's go back up here, the clarity down all the way. I don't want that anymore. There we go. There we go. That fixed a lot of that hard edge on some of the stuff. Let's see. We have curves, polarizing filter. Now, what does a polarizing filter do here? Interesting. I like that. Adds a little bit of vibrance in the water there. Okay, saturation. Not going to touch that because we already globally kind of handled all that. Okay. I think I'm okay with that for now. Let me just do a quick glance at everything, make sure I'm okay. All right. Are we good? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to say we're good on this one. I could probably spend a little bit more time adding a little bit of an Orton effect. I wanted a little bit more kind of fairy tale-y on this one because this one really renders things like really... I think this image is too sharp, if that makes sense. Everything's like a little bit too structured and clarity, even though there's not clarity applied. But we'll just leave it like this. I like it. I'm like 98% cool with it. So we'll say that Luminar version is done. We'll export it, and we will move on to ON1 Photo RAW. All right, and here we are inside of ON1 Photo RAW 2018. ON1 is about to get a pretty big update here this month, I think in a couple weeks. So we might have to reevaluate this in a couple weeks, but there's a big update coming, so we might have to do another test. But right now, I love how snappy ON1 is. It's so much faster than Lightroom. The performance is great. Let's just do a quick zoom in here. Take a look. All right, everything looks good on the render. I remember how it always digs out, ON1 digs out shadows like for days. I think ON1, I still think ON1's slogan for their company should be like hashtag shadows for days. All right, anyway, let's take the highlights down a little bit. I'm gonna jump into the contrast. Ooh. Hey, ON1, you've improved your contrast slider since the last we met. Me likey. All right, let's bump the exposure with that just a tad. Not a big fan of what it's doing to the reds yet again. It's pretty much been my problem this whole time. Let's see, what is the midtones? What is that going to give me? Let's crush the midtones a bit. Take the whites up. I want a view of my not my levels here, my histogram. Take the whites up. There we go. Blacks down. Definitely know I'm going to take that saturation down for sure. A little bit there. Let's see what the structure does inside of ON1. I remember that being pretty nice. A lot like Capture One. ON1 and Capture One are actually very similar the way they do things. ON1 has that shadow recovery edge, but they're very similar the way they handle certain sliders. So let's see what the dehaze does. I remember the dehaze inside of ON1 being really cool. Yep, still cool. All right, still got to do something about that those reds there. So let's take a local adjustment brush, and let's just take the saturation down a tad on this brush, shall we? And we'll just make the brush a little bigger. Make sure we're feathered at 100%. Yep, we are. Very good. And we'll just paint that saturation right out of there. Goodbye. Okay, I love how fast ON1 is. It's all like just super snappy. Everything is happening in real time. I love it. I love it. All right, that's good. Go back to here. I think I want to keep adding more of that beautiful contrast slider. I don't remember the contrast slider being this like fantastic inside of ON1. I like that. All right, cool. Let's see, what else are we gonna do here? ON1 sharpening is actually pretty good. So let's zoom in, take that sharpening up until we're happy. Let's see, I'm pretty happy with about 70. Take the threshold, I remember I like it around 2 or 3. And let's see, what else do I want to do here? Let me drag around the image and make sure that we don't have any issues arising, noise reduction, or the noise or anything like that. Okay, man, even sharpening the water, there are no signs of noise whatsoever. These D850 files, I'll tell you guys, they will stand up to anything. Inside of post-production, you can push these files so far. Okay, that's nice. I think I might want some. The ON1 has a cool. Let's see here. A cool tool. Well, we know we want to do the vignette here, so let's go ahead and do that. Where's my vignette at? Down here. All right, something like that. And then feather it all the way. Oh yeah, I like that. There we go. I think that actually solved the little bit more contrast I was wanting. That's good. I might even bump the exposure again just a little bit, just to compensate for some of that contrast that I've been adding. I've been going a little crazy with that. Okay. Well, other than the crop that I want it to be square this whole time, other than that, I think I'm happy. So let's say that is good, and we'll go ahead and export this and call this our edited ON1 version. So next, we will complete this inside of Aurora HDR, and then we'll take a look at all of them and see what we think. All right, so last but not least, here we are inside of Aurora HDR 2018. So when you drag the photo in, you're presented with this little dialog. You can do tone mapping and ghosting and all this stuff. This is just one single RAW file, so yeah, why not? Let's do some tone mapping. I normally just leave that off, but for the heck of it, let's see what it does. We'll hit apply, and it'll just do its own little algorithm there and then spit out a preview for us, and then we can go from there and see what we want to do to it. If you haven't been able to tell so far, I haven't needed to do a lot to this photo. When you take a really, really, really good photo, or a really simple one like this is what I would call just a really simple one. You don't have to do a lot to it. You tweak some of the things. You might have to go into Photoshop and do some, in some complicated luminosity mask stuff if you want to balance out the light levels like I have before. But you just don't have to do a whole lot of adding things as far as color and all this other stuff. All right, so the first thing I noticed is it definitely tried to make it look a little HDR-ish, so gonna have to work on that. I like some of these presets down here. We're not gonna play with those right now, but immediately my eye is drawn to this one called Paradise. That looks pretty sweet. Let's just click on that one to see what it does. I don't like how saturated it is, but man, that's got a sweet like fairy tale thing going on in the trees. You know what? Let's leave it. Let's leave 60%. Why not? Okay, so if I do that, the preset, I wonder if I can then edit everything else. Let's see. Can I start affecting things? Or can I not? Okay, I can. All right, cool. Let's take that. I know I want to go to the saturation, and we're going to attack that sucker right now. We're going to bring that way down. Let's try a -15 on that and see what happens. Okay, I probably want even more negative. We'll take the vibrance into the negatives too. Let's take the overall exposure down. Okay. What else here? HDR structure. Why not? Do 5% of that. Make the softness a little higher. Microstructure. Interesting. It's like some micro contrast, the tiny little details. On this photo, let's leave that all the way off because the microstructure is going to attack all the little leaves, and I don't want that right now. I wonder if we can increase the softness without having the amount. Let's try that because I want it to be super soft all around the barn. Denoise, we don't need that right now. Image radiance, let's see what that does for us. Okay. Looks like it adds a little bit of a blur effect and maybe a little bit of contrast. It kind of makes the light, like anywhere where the light is hitting here on the edges of the leaves, look very fairy tale. You know, I'm having fun with this. I'm not gonna lie, this is actually kind of fun playing with Aurora. I'm not a huge like HDR software person, but if I'm just using it for basic edits and not like just blending everything together and spitting out a really terrible result, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like it. Ooh, here we go. It's a glow. Man, I'm liking this fairy tale look. Now I'm trying to decide if I want to have this fairy tale look when I start selling prints with it. Let's do a colder glow, shall we? Speaking of that, let's go back up to the white balance and make everything a little colder. I don't like, because we did the tone mapping, you can see all the shadows up here in the trees like have been really pushed to the max. So I don't like that, but I'm assuming that's what happens when you do the tone mapping because it's going to do the standard HDR thing, which is highlights all the way down, shadows all the way up, and spit it out. So I'm going to take the shadows down a good bit here to compensate for that, and the blacks down. There we go. Take the whites up a little bit. Trying to even out the histogram as much as I can without clipping anything. Okay. Let's take those whites back down. It looks like I'm clipping a little bit on the barns. Let's take the highlights down. Just a little bit, not that much. That flattened everything out too much there. Let's take the whites back up again. Maybe the exposure back up a little bit. Nope, too much. Somewhere around there. Okay. You know, that is not bad. Let's keep driving that exposure up just ever so slightly. Okay. Nope, too much again. Got to find that sweet spot with the exposure. Let's see. Okay, I'm happy with that. I can roll with that for a bit. Let's see here. That's the hue, saturation, luminance scale, color toning. Ooh, look, there's a dodge and burn little area built in. Wow. Start painting. No way. I can just start. What is it? Oh, wow, look at this. Lighten and darken. No way. Huh. So do I just... Whoa. How cool is that? Okay. So I can just do this, and then is there a way to... Oh, the strength. Aha. Okay. Let's undo that dodging that I just did, and let's take the strength way down. Like 10%. Let's dodge some of the barn here. And then the overall amount I'll take down too. I like that there's an overall amount in a brush strength. It's pretty neat, actually. Let's take the dark in here. Let's do some burning down here. All in here. All right, do some burning in the shadows up under here. Why not? Some burning across the shoreline always looks good. Kind of separates the shoreline from the water there. Gives a nice little contrast. Let's go back to lighten. This is a cool way to dodge and burn. It's like, it's just already built. It's like an automation, basically. It's just a built-in automation for you. So you can go ahead and do your dodging and burning without having to create an overlay layer in Photoshop and go through all that. What happens if we just kind of dodge some of these little white trees here? Oh yeah. This is pretty neat. I'm getting a little bit addicted to Aurora HDR. I never thought I would say that, but not too shabby. Okay, so let's do that, and then let's take the overall amount down to the 20s so that we're not going too crazy with this. All right, not bad. Let's see. Let's go back to the saturation. I'm looking at it again. I still want it to be a little less saturated, so let's keep bumping that saturation down a little bit until it gets a little more faded, like a faded look. There we go. I think I like that. Let's go back up and mess with the contrast again. It needs more contrast for sure. I'm going to crush the shadows again. Take those shadows down. Okay. This was a little more like darker and grungier than the others. I can already kind of tell, but I like it. I don't know. It's my mood's already changed, I guess. It's kind of neat. All right, well, let's call this one my Aurora HDR version. So that'll be my last version here. And let's go ahead and hop into Adobe Bridge and take a look at all the final edits. And let's just, I don't know, talk about them, compare them, and see what we think. Whew. All right, so my eyes hurt a little bit, and I'm just ready to look at these. I've never taken one photo and processed it back to back to back to back in 5 different softwares like that. It's a little confusing and creatively tiring, so I can already tell it's funky. The colors are already kind of really different between each version. So let's go ahead and just jump into it, make some interesting observations. Let me know in the comments which is your favorite version, and I'll let you know which one is mine if I even have one, and we'll go from there, see what happens. All right, so here is Capture One. Here is Lightroom, Luminar, ON1 Photo RAW, and Aurora HDR. Okay, let's see. Capture One, Lightroom, Luminar, ON1 Photo RAW, Aurora HDR. Okay, interesting. Let's go back to Capture One, and let's do a 200% view on the barn there. So there's the barn with Capture One, Lightroom, Luminar, ON1 Photo RAW, and Aurora HDR. Okay, so already I can tell without even having to go through them again that Capture One is still our sharpest. And we didn't even add sharpening inside of Capture One, I believe. It's just the default sharpening. We just added a little bit of that Capture One structure. So again, we'll do it. Capture One, Lightroom, Luminar, ON1 Photo RAW, Aurora HDR. So I'll go ahead and tell you this. This is the Aurora HDR version. I was having a lot of fun with this when I was processing it. Now that I see it exported with the other ones, I hate it. And I don't. It's not that I hate the software. The software is great and very capable. I don't like the way that I did this. I think I might like the trees the best on this one, like the way they're kind of glowy, but I don't like the overall look. I feel like it has an overall like a bleach bypass look. It's like a very like I don't know, cheesy, like really contrasty, desaturated, kind of hipstery thing going on. Not a huge fan of that, but I do like the glow. I'm going to have to go back in Aurora HDR when I actually have like time to really work on this. And to be honest, I'll probably edit this one in Photoshop. I'll probably start with it in one of the RAW processors, edit it in Photoshop, do some dodging and burning there, and then I'm going to definitely use Aurora HDR as a plugin and mess with some of that, the Orton effect stuff, because the glowing is really cool. The glowing and the image radiance, I just simply did too much of it. I would definitely call that over-edited. So it's cool, but definitely not my favorite. Let's go through them again. So there's Capture One, Lightroom, Luminar, ON1 Photo RAW, and Aurora HDR. Okay, I think that the Luminar version is my favorite. That one's the most natural. It's the Luminar, I think, was the one where I said that I like the contrast slider. Luminar and ON1 had the best contrast sliders. So I like the Luminar version. The Barn is a little hot to me. It's a little too saturated. But I think the Luminar is my favorite, and then there's ON1. ON1 is my second favorite if I would have remembered to cool off the white balance. For some reason, I liked the white balance at the time. I still think it needs to be cooled off a little bit. It's a little too warm to me. But I think ON1, and here's Luminar. Luminar, ON1, Luminar, ON1. I think those two are my favorite. Capture One is, I don't know, so it's not quite enough contrast. I should have made it a little darker. Lightroom just looks really blah and faded to me, and it's just not sharp. It's just not. Man, Lightroom has trouble with their sharpening for sure. I don't like that. Aurora HDR is just the weird stylistic thing that I did. I'm not a big fan of that in the end. But again, that was me. That was not the software, so don't take it out on Aurora. Luminar and ON1, definitely my two favorites. Let me know which one you guys think. Obviously, this isn't like what I would do if I was doing a final edit. I would spend some more time. I would do some Photoshop. I would do some cleanup, some distraction removal. Like I said, I'd probably do that 4:5 crop on it. I think that takes a lot of the distraction away and just makes it nicer. And then in the end, I would add my favorite sharpener, which is the Nik Collection sharpener. You just cannot beat that. And then I'd probably play around with some Orton effects and some glowy stuff, some fairy tale looks inside of Aurora HDR. So there you go. I know that was kind of a long video going through all those softwares again, but I think it was cool and interesting. It was definitely fun to do this 2-video test to see in the end which one it's not really which one is the best or which one I like or dislike. It's really to see how each of them behave with these raw files. And it's been cool because now I know in my head that, if I have a photo that I want some really nice shadow detail and I'm not getting it somewhere else, I know immediately, hey, shadow detail, no noise, I'm going to go with ON1 Photo RAW. If I want some more stylistic stuff, I'm going to go with Aurora HDR, maybe Luminar. If I want razor sharp, crazy details, but I'm going to have to work on some stuff in Photoshop, then I'm going to go with Capture One. Lightroom, I don't know. Anyway, so there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This was part 2. If you want to watch part 1, just wait to the end screen of this video and there'll be a link to that. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.